Hi everyone, my name is Austin. As we spent this entire summer looking back at Robin Williams and really just celebrating how much of a great actor and comedian he was, I sort of want to talk about really what I've come to appreciate about the man in recent years because while he was certainly a funny man, there was also quite a bit to him than what you might expect. When I was growing up, Robin Williams was, to me, the funniest man alive at that very moment. Whether it be in Aladdin, where he played the genie, or in Mork and Mindy, Williams always brought a lot to those roles, and always cracked me up in ways only matched by the amount of times I watched Mel Brooks' comedies. As time has gone on, though, I've not only gotten to appreciate Robin Williams as a comedian, but also as an actor and overall person. Williams' acting was truly something to behold, as just as he could be hilarious, he was also a phenomenal serious actor. Whether it be in movies such as Dead Poet Society, Awakenings, and especially his Oscar-winning performance in Good Will Hunting, he was truly a fantastic actor when it came to dramas. Even more comedy-focused films like The World According to Garp, Moscow on the Hudson, The Fisher King, and Mrs. Doubtfire, which had their fair share of dramatic moments, which Williams would handle very well in all cases. He was also never afraid to go against the grain, starring in thrillers such as 1 Hour Photo and Insomnia, where in both films he played two very sinister characters, with 1 Hour Photo being one truly disturbing look into one man's obsession to his customers, and going toe-to-toe with Al Pacino in Christopher Nolan's remake of the 1997 thriller of the same name. Williams would also star in fantasy films like The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, Hook, and Jumanji, had a rather interesting appearance in Kenneth Branagh's Dead Again, and aside from Aladdin, had voiceover roles in Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest, AI, Artificial Intelligence, and Happy Feet, meaning he could do almost anything. Williams also had some rather cool interests, including Isaac Asimov's Foundation trilogy of books, pen and paper role-playing games, video games, for which his daughter Zelda was named after the family favorite video game series, The Legend of Zelda, and anime, even receiving a signed copy of Paranoia Agent, courtesy of its director Satoshi Kon, and having numerous figurines, including Dunan Knut from Appleseed, which Williams was a fan of. Needless to say, Robin Williams was one of the coolest, most authentic people on Earth, and was also one of the greatest actors of our time, proving that this funny man was a force to be reckoned with in all cases. And so with that in mind, it's time to cover one of my favorite Robin Williams movies of all time, one of my favorite comedies of all time, and just in general, one of my favorite movies of all time. And that is this film. Ladies and gentlemen, Good Morning, Vietnam. Or, here, I'll let him handle this.
Good morning, Vietnam!
Thank you. Directed by Barry Levinson and starring Robin Williams. So, without further ado, let's talk about it. Based loosely on the experiences of Armed Forces Radio Service DJ Adrian Cronauer, the plot goes like this. In 1965, Airman Second Class Adrian Cronauer was sent to Saigon to be, as I said, a DJ for the Armed Forces Radio Service. In the process, he turns the mundane, drab, and trite atmosphere of the airwaves into an irreverent, envelope-pushing cavalcade of manic humor, news that is usually censored like mad, and the sounds of the 60s. Well, early to mid-60s at the very least. don't expect to hear Jimi Hendrix or Cream. It puts him at odds with his superiors, namely 2nd Lieutenant Stephen Houck and Major Philip Dickerson, with one abiding to strict guidelines in terms of the Army's guidelines regarding humor and music choices, and the other being a ruthless leader who treats all enlisted men like ass, but gaining the love of the other DJs and Brigadier General Taylor. What follows are uproarious quips, some rather serious moments that remind you that the Vietnam War was rougher than you could possibly imagine, and groovy tunes that remain in your head for the next 5 years. Yeah, not much else to write here, but given that it reminds me of another favorite movie of mine, Pump Up the Volume, I can definitely get behind the plot for the movie. And it really does deliver what you came to see. Minus the coffee. You'll have to get that somewhere else.
We're out of coffee!
And with that, let's dive into the production. The production for the film started back in 1979, when Adrian Cronauer attempted to pitch a sitcom based on his time as an AFRS DJ, which he did while functioning as a classical music morning host for WVWR in Roanoke, Virginia, which is now Virginia's Tech WVTF. Cronauer intended it to be essentially a mix of both MASH and WKRP in Cincinnati, which were two of the most successful shows of the time, especially MASH. He didn't find success though, as most of the networks didn't view the idea of war as comedy material. Even though, like I said, MASH was a huge success, and that dealt with the Korean War. But whatever, TV networks. Cronauer then decided to make it into a TV movie of the week, which got the attention of Robin Williams, and from there, the product took on a life of its own, with a lot of Cronauer's treatment essentially being drastically altered by the time writer Mitch Markowitz, who had a bunch of TV credits, including, funny enough, MASH, as well as What's Happening and Monk, was brought on. Cronauer, nevertheless, was satisfied, commenting, "I'm very happy with it. Of course, it was never intended to be an accurate point-by-point biography. It was intended as a piece of entertainment, and Williams was playing a character named Adrian Cronauer, who shared a lot of my experiences. But actually, he was playing Robin Williams." Williams also had said that his portrayal of Cronauer was essentially him, at least a whopping 95% of himself, with at least 5% of Cronauer being inside the character. Regarding said portrayal, Cronauer also said, "Anybody who has been in the military will tell you that if I did half the things in that movie, I'd still be in Leavenworth by now." A lot of Hollywood imagination went into the movie. I was a disc jockey in Vietnam, and I did teach English in my spare time. I was not thrown out of Vietnam. I stayed for my full 1-year tour, and I was honorably discharged. In keeping with the loose nature of the screenplay, none of the characters in the film were based on or inspired by people the actual Cronauer had known, although he did declare those he knew as atypical military types that existed then, along with scenes like where this Cronauer teaches his class to use street slang and to swear, his pursuit of a Vietnamese woman, and his Jeep being blown up in the jungle, as these didn't happen. Although I should mention that I couldn't find the source, so take this with a grain of salt. Cronauer did, however, witness a bombing of a restaurant that he had only just left, and bickered with Army censors who didn't want him to report on it. So there is the one thing that can be confirmed. Cronauer also claimed that during production, director Barry Levinson, whose directorial credits include Diner, The Natural, Young Sherlock Holmes, 10 Men, Rain Man, Avalon, Bugsy, Disclosure, Sleepers, Wag the Dog, Sphere, Liberty Heights, and The Bay, plus did some writing for screenplays like Silent Movie, High Anxiety, and Justice for All, Inside Moves, and some uncredited work for Tootsie, blocked him and Williams from seeing each other out of fear of his characterization being changed, which is understandable. You don't want to be too on the nose when playing a real-life figure, though thankfully they were able to meet at the film's premiere in New York, so it all worked out. Filming was mostly shot in Bangkok, Thailand. At the time, several hundred male students from the International American School of Bangkok, ISB, were brought on as extras to perform in the good chunk of shots showing American GIs throughout the film. Excuse me. As a thank you, Robin Williams actually came to ISB and put on a stand-up routine for all the students in the 10th grade and above. And of course, there's another thing to know about Bangkok. It's really hot down there. So hot you could fry an egg on the sidewalk if need be.
Crank the AC!
Also, Williams got paid less than $2 million for his role in the film, along with some gross participation points, which is some Hollywood accounting stuff. All while the film cost around $13 million to make, so there's a paycheck right there, and there's certainly a budget. So, with this done, because I don't want to be here for 2,000 years.
2,000 years later.
Hello everybody, my name is Aaron Handsome McGregor, the 5th, yeah. I'm here in what is the set of one of my ancestors' old filming locations. Did a lot of movie reviews here, and I'm here to honor him after completing his 2,000-year-old review of Good Morning Vietnam, one of his favorite movies of all time. So here I am to honor him in his own set room. So let's talk about movies, shall we?
Let's get to what I think of the film. I love Good Morning Vietnam so much. I love this movie. It's a genuine favorite of mine, and I'm glad I'm talking about it now because it's one of the funniest movies in Robin Williams' filmography and easily one of his best. To start off, the writing is excellent, and not only gives you the comedy, but also knows how to balance the laughs with some rather grim reminders that the Vietnam War was brutal and was really a dark time in US history. The Vietnam War isn't an easy thing to make funny, but the movie finds that excellent balance between the hilarious moments that permeate throughout with some truly painful and horrific moments, such as the bombing of the restaurant, the escalation of the war in the What a Wonderful World montage, and when Cronauer confronts Tuan, which proved to show just how well written the movie is, and also showcases just how well the actors handle it, but we'll get to that in a little bit. The screenplay really works here, and ensures that just as it's as funny as you can imagine, it also takes the subject matter of Vietnam seriously, ensuring that it doesn't forget where and when the film is set in, ensuring a nice balance of both laughter and seriousness. Moving to the star of the show, Robin Williams is fine goddamn tastic as Adrian Cronauer, the disc jockey who pushes the limits straight off a cliff and into the belly of a live volcano in this baby, which captures the essence of what Good Morning Vietnam is all about. In this film, Williams is hilarious as the envelope-pushing airman, delivering nothing but zinger after zinger in rapid succession to uproarious effect. So much so that I might be here for hours just showing every moment that fills me with laughter. But trust me, it'll do the same for you too. It's also a testament to just how gifted Robin Williams was, as pretty much all of the jokes were made up at the top of his head. And there was so much material here that there's a whole reel filled with stuff that didn't even make the final cut, which shows that the man was a king of improv and delivered his best without having to follow a specific guideline. Just let him do his thing and let the magic happen. Williams also handles the serious moments very well, such as when Kronauer gets back to the radio center following the bombing of the restaurant he was at, where he goes off on a rant, and in the scene where he confronts Tuan, which showcased just how versatile he was as an actor, and how he handled both the funny and dramatic scenes perfectly.
Thank you very much.
But while Williams may be the star, it's also important to remember that Forrest Whitaker as Private Edward Garlick is also pretty good here. From the moment Kronauer gets off the plane, Garlick becomes one of the DJ's biggest admirers, and by the end, he decides to try his hand at being the disc jockey due to how much Kronauer had inspired him throughout his time in Vietnam. Whitaker certainly wasn't the celebrated actor he is now, but was certainly getting parts during this point in his career, including an early appearance in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, plus films like Vision Quest, The Color of Money, Platoon, and Stakeout, all before getting his big break with the movie Bird, where he gained plenty of acclaim for his role as jazz saxophonist Charlie Bird Parker, and eventually won an Oscar for playing Ugandan dictator Idi Amin in The Last King of Scotland. And in Good Morning Vietnam, you can certainly tell that Whitaker would go on to do great things. He makes Garlick a charming character, one who admires Kronauer and fights for him to get back on the air when he gets kicked off, and both he and Williams work well with each other, proving that these guys were legends in the making. You also have a very understated performance from Toon Thon Tran as Tuan, aka Bon Tu, the brother of the woman Kronauer tries to impress, that he ultimately befriends, knowing his chances with her are futile, but later is revealed to be a Viet Cong operative who is responsible for the bombing of the restaurant Kronauer helped try to get him into. Tuan is basically a symbol of just how extreme US occupation got in Vietnam, as while what he did was wrong, you can see why he did what he did, being angered by how US soldiers decimated his village and killed those he cared about, showing how excessive military occupation was in the country. At the same time though, you do see that Tuan in a way valued his friendship with Kronauer by saving his life when his jeep hits a mine, forcing him and Garlick to hide until Tuan saves them both, which shows that Tuan actually did like Kronauer in spite of his resentment of the abuse the US placed upon him and his people. Tran gives a good performance here. Shame that he didn't go very far. The same goes for Shintara Sukapatana as Rin, the girl that Kronauer tries to impress, only for her to rebuff him. While she may have only been constructed for the movie along with everything else, she nevertheless is a decent character, and Sukapatana gives a good performance in the film. And both she and Williams do have good chemistry, even if they remain only friends and nothing more. Sukapatana has mostly stuck to stuff in her native Thailand, but nevertheless makes an impression in what is her only Hollywood film ever. So it's not a huge loss. Moving to the people that did have a long-standing career in Hollywood, we have the late, great Bruno Kirby as Lieutenant Stephen Houck, the strict, by-the-books army man who's unamused by Kronauer shenanigans, which comes into conflict with his ideals on what is funny and what's not funny. Kirby pulls it off here, as most of the humor comes from how much of a dolt he really is. An example of this is when he replaces Kronauer as radio host, and he thinks he's funny when he tries to talk in a French accent and honk a bike horn, when in reality he looks like a bigger idiot than he does when not trying to be funny. which in turn makes it hilarious as to just how much of a loser he really is. Also, Hauk should really know better than to play polka music for the troops. The only time he played polka is during Oktoberfest, or when Weird Al Yankovic is throwing a party at his house. You've also got J.T. Walsh as Sergeant Major Philip Dickerson, or as he's known by his real name, Major Asshole.
Who is he? He's an asshole, sir. I know that. What's his name? That is his name, sir. Asshole. Major Asshole.
To call Dickerson a douchebag is an understatement. Finding Cronauer's sense of humor annoying, and most of all, the dude abuses his authority, going so far as to send Cronauer out into the field in the hopes that he gets killed in the line of duty. J.T. Walsh always had a knack for playing a lot of bad guys during his lifetime. See Breakdown as an example. And in Good Morning Vietnam, he makes it damn sure that he's unlikable and that he gets what's coming to him. And he does. It's complete with a satisfying comeback from Cronauer.
You know, you're in more dire need of a blowjob than any white man in history.
Other people that make good, memorable appearances include Robert Wool as Sergeant Marty Lee Dreiwitz in what is the third film I've covered on the show that features him, who certainly makes the most of his time on screen. Noble Willingham as General Taylor, the man who becomes the biggest Cronauer fan in the infantry. Richard Edson, who had plenty of memorable appearances in films, playing Sal in Platoon, Billy Maher in 8 Men Out, Vito in Do the Right Thing, Spike in the Super Mario Bros. 1993, and Tick in Strange Days, but I'll always remember him as a garage attendant from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Anyway, he plays a character named Private Abersol, who often has to put up with Hauk's BS, and Richard Partnow, credits listed here, as Dan the Man Levitang, who takes over for Cronauer when his show is done. Moving from that, the movie is well shot, complete with fast camera shots and dynamic angles, along with plenty of aerial shots in most cases during the music montages. This was performed by the late Peter Silva, who had previously worked with Barry Levinson on Diner and Tin Men, which I should mention that last one came out the same year as Good Morning Vietnam, not to mention working on films like Donnie Brasco and The Strangers, and it's really top-notch work, especially when you're working with someone like Robin Williams. You need to catch all of his energetic movements. It also has great editing, cutting back and forth between Cronauer in the studio and what's going on in Vietnam when he's blasting the tunes, and also helps to make sure that the pacing is good, not a dying animal on the premises. This was done, I should say, by the also deceased Stu Linder, whose work included Barry Levinson's other works like Diner, The Natural, Young Sherlock Holmes, 10 Men, Rain Man, Avalon, and Bugsy, and most other films I mentioned before, plus many others. And not to mention older films like The Misfits, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, Seconds, and Grand Prix, and it's nice work, and helps to make this 2-hour film not feel like a drag, unlike my cousins were saying. Last but not least, the music is excellent. There is a score courtesy of Alex North, who composed the scores for A Streetcar Named Desire, Viva Zapata, Spartacus, The Misfits, Cleopatra, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Willard, Dragon Slayer, and Breezy's Honor. And what you do here is quite good and fits the moments it's used in. This obviously wasn't the main focus. In fact, some of it was stuff the dude had conceived for 2001: A Space Odyssey, but was ultimately rejected. But it does have a solid lineup of early 60s classics here that are plenty iconic, including Martha Vandel's Nowhere to Run, the Beach Boys' I Get Around, the Searchers' Sugar and Spice, James Brown's I Got You, I Feel Good, the Rivera's rendition of California Sun, and Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World. And they work in every scene they're in. Trust me, when you hear What a Wonderful World and see villages burning in the background, it's an example of music working very well because of how chilling it is. And when you hear everything else, you just feel like dancing the night away because it's just that good. The soundtrack is excelente, senor, and is something to behold and enjoy with all your friends while watching one of the funniest movies set in one of the darkest moments in U.S. history. Overall, Good Morning Vietnam is fantastic, and one of my favorite films starring Robin Williams. The film got its release on December 13th, 1987, where it grossed $123.9 million, making back its $13 million budget and even becoming the fourth highest grossing movie of 1987, just behind Beverly Hills Cop 2, Fatal Attraction, and Three Men and a Baby, with that last one being a big success with Disney and their now defunct Touchstone Pictures banner. The movie also got rave reviews from critics, with Siskel and Ebert giving the film 2 thumbs up, Richard Corliss of Time calling it the best comedy since MASH to be centered around the military, as well as calling it one of the year's best. Excuse me. And Squidward Tentacles called it the movie that made him truly fall in love with Robin Williams, something he echoed during Mirio Togoda's podcast, Movie Time with Mirio, in 2017, where he discussed it alongside Empire of the Sun as being some of the best films of 1987, with Issei Kyoto and Kyle MacLachlan also appearing as guests. Many gave praise to that of Robin Williams' performance, which landed him an Oscar nomination for Best Actor and won him both a Golden Globe and a Grammy, as well as an American Comedy Award for Funniest Actor in a Motion Picture role. AMC even named it as one of the 20 greatest war movies, and in 2000, the American Film Institute included it in AFI's 100 Years, 100 Laughs, where it came in at 100. The film almost even got a sequel, which was known as Good Morning Chicago, which would have centered on Adrian Cronauer as he works as a journalist at the 1968 Democratic National Convention, with a script being written by Mark Frost, whose film credits consist of The Believers, Nightbreed, and those Fantastic Four movies from back in the 2000s, but mostly worked in television, doing work on Hill Street Blues before co-creating Twin Peaks with David Lynch. This ended up getting shelved, as Williams, director Barry Levinson, and Disney all had disagreements over how the film should be done, which certainly would have been an interesting concept, even if a sequel wasn't all that neat. But it just goes to show you that Good Morning Vietnam was a hit, and helped boost Williams' appeal beyond just being Mork for Mork. And just think, without this film, we wouldn't have his equally wonderful Dead Poets Society, which is such a great movie that I may have to cover it someday. Though maybe not during this event because I've already made up my mind on what I'm going to cover next. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's wrap this up. Good Morning Vietnam is a fantastic movie, and I definitely recommend that you go check it out. Whether you decide to pick it up on this DVD here, or you decide to pick it up on Blu-ray, you're definitely going to have yourself a good time with Good Morning Vietnam. It's hilarious, Robin Williams gives a great performance in it, there's great music to behold, and it actually has some rather good, serious moments that deal with the fact that the Vietnam War was the Vietnam War, and it sucked, and it was a dark time in U.S. history. It really is a great movie that takes the subject of Vietnam seriously while also still retaining its sense of humor. It really is a great movie and one of my personal favorites, and I hope you check it out. And so with that, this concludes my review of Good Morning Vietnam. I hope you enjoyed it, found it entertaining, educational, and it made you want to seek out this movie because, well, it's one of his best. And really, you should be watching a lot of these movies, just a lot of movies starring Robin Williams. Not just the ones that I'm reviewing, but also the ones that I may want to cover in the future. Because this may just be a summer event, but there's a bunch of Robin Williams movies out there that are really good, and I may even review. But I'm not reviewing. But there's a particular movie that I know for a fact that I am going to review this next month. To wrap up this whole event, I tease it, and well, I figured the best way to remember Robin Williams and close out this whole event is to talk about what's coming up soon. And so with that, I will catch you later. I'll see you then.
More dire need of a blowjob than any white man in history. That's funny.